Hello, my name is Sean Kathuria, and I'm a 14-year-old student at the Petty School. I'm a sophomore in high school, and I'm passionate about entrepreneurship and computer science.
My name is Pranit Agarwal. I'm a junior in high school at Westminster High School South with an analytical background and a passion in business.
So first, we want to thank the organizers of this event for allowing us the privilege of presenting here at 2020's Dare to Be Great Challenge. So today we're going to be talking about cost-effective artificial intelligence solution to increase crop yield. So first thing I want to talk about is by 2050, the world's population, as you can see here, is going to be over nearly 10 billion. So we can't just double the amount of farmland we have in order to feed this many people. We need to optimize the farmland that we have to create more food. And we cannot fund programs that just give food to people. We have to teach them how to create this food. So, Pranit, would you like to add?
Yes, in an effort to answer this fundamental question, Sean and I asked ourselves one thing. How can we use the resources we currently have in technology or just agriculture to optimize the crop yield?
So the answer is simple yet complex. We talked about artificial intelligence. So before I get into that, we wanted to show you what farmland looks like in some places in the US and other countries. It's ideal. You can grow crops around the year. So you can there's a lot of benefits to this, but this is not really reality in most parts of the world. What's reality is this. This is farmland. Pranit, if you'd like to explain, how does this
Yeah.
happen?
So you can see the darkened areas are they're very dry, they don't have enough water. Then on the right you see the soil is very red due to the fact that you're not growing the right crop, you're burning out the soil. And for example, tobacco did this in Virginia and other eastern states in the 1700s. And that's not what we want to do because we're burning out the earth when in fact we needed it to be gearing up for more people. As Sean mentioned, 9.7 billion by 2050.
So we talked about AI, right? So AI revolves around using large sets of data to draw patterns and can easily be used to find solutions to grow the most amount of crop in the most efficient way possible to feed the most people.
You might be thinking, technology is expensive. There's no way to do this in poorer countries where food is even more scarce. In the next few minutes, we're going to break down how we can use this data to accomplish cheap and effective solutions.
Okay, so starting with data, what do we already have? What data can we use to advance this solution? So you might be aware of Google Earth, you might be aware of weather apps. So using this climate and topographical data, we can use those data models from companies like Microsoft and IBM to decipher what crops are grown in this space that is allocated for crops in different countries.
The implementation structure we plan on using is a drone with a camera attached for simplicity purposes. There are no humans involved in the process, and the data collected by the drone will be transported to a data center rented out by the likes of Microsoft and IBM. Once it reaches the data center, the data, which will be land area, topographical data structure, and climate and crop, is going to be analyzed by Microsoft or IBM's algorithm to relay back the message to farmers and other workers. We will hire local educated graduates to travel within 100 miles of their home base. The system will notify them of the changes needed to improve the crop yield, and then they will go out and explain to farmers what they need to do.
So in terms of funding, so it's in the government's best interest as well as food corporations. So for governments, the increase in spending power of their lowest income group will result in a higher GDP per capita and make partnerships with other countries more feasible. So I want to talk about the algorithm a little bit more. So this is some market trends from different countries in terms of GDP per capita, and you can see in Burma and Bolivia it's very low. So our model only depends on a few factors for the sake of simplicity. So you need area of land surveyed, crop grown, weather and climate data, and topographical info. In today's world, all of these things can be easily understood by a machine, and that concept can be hard to grasp. But the machine algorithm we want to pioneer can tell us how to plant specific crops in a specific space to maximize food profits and output. So that's how you can cater to both audiences. So corporations, governments, people who are farming, right? So for food corporations, right? You have the more food produced, that means they can decrease the cost of goods sold because there is more supply to meet the demand. So they can still choose to pay farmers less and maximize profit margins by like notice how you can do things like charging the consumer extra, right? So they can still choose to do that, but it would be in their best interest to buy into this program. So,
Additionally,
okay.
um, we want to make sure that the people we hire understand the vernacular of that area so that we can this program is marketed towards the everyday worker, the farmer who doesn't have the luxuries that we do sitting here in our homes.
Yes, so our goals remain stagnant. We want to increase the GDP per capita and we want to increase the amount of food produced. Thank you.
Is AI the most cost-effective way to come up with viable methods of farming? Specifically, do you have any statistics guaranteeing that the AI will make a significant difference in improving the crop yield, especially considering that drones and computations will be expensive?
Yes, because AI revolves solely around the analysis of data. So let's break down your question a little bit. So basically, what we found you to be asking is, since AI revolves around analyzing data, you're asking if analyzing data is a viable way to take large amounts of information and optimize it so people can increase their incomes. AI simply further optimizes our data than the methods we have now. AI allows us to do more with the data we are given from these drones than ever before. So yes, we believe AI is a viable method because it allows us to get so many more conclusions out of our data. And the more conclusions we get out of our data, the more we can take action.
Microsoft ran a pilot program using 175 American farmers using their AI algorithms. Those who listened to the program did 30% better than those who didn't delay planting the crop. When the next year, when this was expanded to almost 3,000 farmers, results showed that a 10 to 30% increase in yield based on the crop and the location, which are two aspects we want to measure.
So drones are becoming way more mainstream, and therefore their costs are decreasing. Nowadays, you can buy a drone with an HD camera and widescreen view for probably retail at around $400. And using warehouse prices when you're buying multiple, we can lower the price by at least 25 to 50%. And it's important to remember that there's not going to be just simply one drone that's going to cover, let's say, one farm or one person's plot. There's can be a single drone can cover a really large area. So you can take one drone and you can cover miles and miles. So we can optimize what we spend on drones to optimize income that the farmers will receive.
What is the plan or concept for carrying out the implementations identified by the AI?
We are going to convey the information of best crops to grow, when to grow them, and other techniques such as watering and ideal harvesting time. We're going to hire educated individuals in each area who know the language to convey the information found by the AI program. And we're going to make sure that these farmers follow through with this because this is in the best interest of them. We want to increase their crop yield, which means that there's more money in their pocket and more food in this world for our growing population.
How does this project contribute to improving crop yield? Why should large technology companies opt for this method and not traditional methods?
So like we said earlier, the whole project revolves around taking data, analyzing it, and using it to create further. You take that data and you say, how can I predict outcomes next time? So Microsoft and IBM and these companies have already pioneered methods like this, where they take topographical data, they take climate data, they figure out what crop is being grown, and they say, is this the right course of action to grow this crop? Should we be growing it in this climate? And when should we start growing it in the season? And when you optimize all three of those things, then what you're able to do is you're able to get the most effective crop where you are, and you're able to get the most of that crop. And you know what that does? We have a growing population. When you're able to do those two things, you can feed significantly more people. So that's really the most important thing. So technology companies are already doing it because they understand that their AI is going to be the basis for this. And the only way to do it, to analyze this much data with millions of farms across the world, is to use AI. AI revolves around taking large data sets and optimizing them. That is the purpose of this technology. And we want to use it to its fullest potential. And we are not the first ones to think of this. Microsoft, we've given you this statistic. Microsoft has already done this before. It can increase efficiency by up to 30% in farms. So we know technology companies would be willing to partner. And this improves crop yield because it takes the data and it optimizes it well.
I just want to add, Sean brought up the fact that Microsoft is doing this, but one big thing is that their analysis is far more expensive because they are looking at they're taking several different data points, and additionally, they're in a very exclusive market right now. They're only focusing on the United States. Well, we want to roll this out globally because, in fact, most American farms are in much better shape than other third world countries. So that's our plan.
How would you get Microsoft or IBM to commit to a partnership to reduce necessary technology, and how would you make it profitable for them?
So what we really want you to understand is that machine learning and AI algorithms, they're intended to work like cognizant humans do. And for that, you need to have large sets of data. So when you hear the word training AI models, training this with given data, Microsoft, IBM, these companies are using this venture where you can go to farms and take that data for their own AI models. It is not for data is the new gold. So the desire of profit is there, but the desire of profit is masked within that data. So what you do is if you get these companies if you partner with a company, but as we explained, their costs are incredibly high. But if you take this idea and you take the data from across the world and you expand upon it, that's where the profit potential is for these companies like that. Right, so that's one of the reasons they do it is because they can gather that data, and that's why companies like Microsoft are doing it today. So that's how they get the profit out of it.
Currently, while you may think that Amazon's online e-commerce website is the main money creator for the company, in fact, Amazon Web Services, which is their more algorithm-based thing, represents most of their profit. So as you can see, that this is
Exactly.
in fact actually a changing market where we're moving towards data being highly important. And the collection of data means that companies like Microsoft and IBM, or Amazon for that matter, can improve their models so that they can then go sell it to other companies.
Mhm.
Like, and that's the whole goal, is that data collection leads to profit.
What is your plan for partnering with large tech companies, incentivizing rural and traditional farmers to listen to the advice given by AI, implementing changes suggested by data, and why would the government be willing to support your proposal?
So I think this team brings a pretty good point. So some farmers, they like to stick to their traditional methods and they are going to be reluctant to change how they've been doing things for generations. But when you take this fact into account, you also have to consider one thing. Currently, 80% of the 770 million people living in extreme poverty right now are in rural areas, and 64% of those people work in agriculture. We are providing an education source for these farmers to get out of extreme poverty and increase the GDP per capita to live a more prosperous life. Because these things don't seem correlated. You see, we're making more crops, but how does that help people live more prosperous lives? Well, if you can create more crops, you can sell more, you can provide more for your family. And the way to create more crops, people often don't see that an answer could be data. An answer could be taking what you have, taking the data where you live, and trying to see how you can make the most out of what you can plant in the area that you have. And when you do that, you can convince these farmers to say, hey, look, you can make a lot more money. You can provide a lot more for the people you have to provide for. And, that's what we want to do. That's the incentive we're going to give them because we have the capability based on the drone methods we've been proposing. We have the capability to be increasing the GDP per capita in countries like Burma. But we need to be able to convince these farmers. And you're right, that's something that must be done. But our plan to do it is to incentivize them with being able to provide more. Brennan, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I personally want to add that, back in the day when it came to increasing the amount of crop you could sell, it was, hey, let's just move 5 acres more to the out west, right? But that doesn't work right now. We've reached a capacity where we don't have more farmland to give. We need to maximize what we currently have, and that can only be done if we move with the times. If we're stuck in the past, we're not going to be able to adapt to what's happening. If we stay with our old methods, we're not going to be able to support the 10 billion people that the UN expects us to have by 2050. We need to move forward in order to adapt to the changing times. And using AI and data analytics is one way we can move towards increased crop yield. For governments, the increase in spending power of their lowest income group will result in a higher GDP per capita, as Sean mentioned, and making partnerships with other countries more feasible because each individual person has has more spending power, which means that you're not only buying the bare necessities, you have the luxury to buy maybe something that's a want and not necessarily a need because currently people are living paycheck to paycheck. And in fact, most of the times can't even afford what they need, right? So the goal of this is to make sure that they can at least afford what they need. And this is really what the government needs to think about is in order to attract people to partners, it needs to create attractable people within the country so that if you partner with a country, they'll be willing to give their product that they create up so that you can consume it and actually give the necessary service or money in return. And that's what we really want to. That's why governments need to partner with us.
One of the major strengths of your video was your clear and confident presentation of your ideas. You guys were very well spoken and showed an impressive amount of knowledge and research regarding artificial intelligence.
In addition, we think your idea was really forward-thinking because of how you incorporated modern technology like AI into the common practice of agriculture. It was a very innovative and 21st century way of tackling the problem, which we really like.
We like that you also place emphasis on making sure your solution can be applied realistically, especially because it has been done before. For example, during your Q&A session, you stated that tech companies like Microsoft and IBM are already collecting agricultural data and using it to create models, proving that this idea is feasible and has a reasonable basis.
The project's major strength we consider to be the fact that the team considers costs and how to make drones not only cheaper but more profitable compared to other methods. The idea is focused on self-sufficiency, thinking not only in the long term, but how to ensure farmers and businesses will not be relying on unsustainable methods, for example, depending on external parties or limited resources that will eventually run out, meaning they're trying to make the best use of what the soil can offer. Also, the team is very realistic in the enormous amount of data that has to be analyzed for the issue in question. The AI will gather data, which is the greatest tool to know the causes of the problem, and it is very positive in the sense that evidence-based research has a more efficient impact, attracting more investors. Finally, the team has effectively simplified the practicalities to those who are less familiar to AI.
Exactly. I believe that the fact of how realistic they are is a very big strength of their part, since they really show how possible it is and how they show the knowledge of that issue.
I also think it is a strength that they simplify some technical terms, so even if you're not part of the business area, you can easily understand.
Now, for the strength for AI for agriculture is that they did provide an environmentally sustainable solution that takes advantage of the new technology, which improves way of life. There is a clear strategy for implementation as well.
Some strengths of this proposal are that it sets up an infrastructure for data analysts and research for farmers. This is an efficient method to collect statistics and other information from farms.
The group also has a great way of explaining the importance of data and AI technology and examples of algorithms used by large companies. Finally, it addresses the very pressing issue of food security.
Bringing this advanced technology to more remote areas is very innovative, and while we do commend you for using the past success of this idea as the basis of your idea, we also believe that this detracts from the originality of your plan, because as you stated, it has already been done.
As for your presentation, we thought that your video could have been done in a more creative format because it is currently just a slide presentation with a voiceover. We wish that you would spend more time developing the visuals to keep the presentation more engaging.
Additionally, the incentive for large tech companies to fund AI technology is unclear. In your question and answer segment, you stated that data is gold, and thus companies like Microsoft and IBM would want to pay for your data. However, if this is true, then why would these companies want a middleman, which would prove to be more costly than collecting the data themselves? They have the capacity to collect the agricultural data without the help of a mediator, yet they haven't, which makes it questionable if these companies even truly value this data.
We also noted that the process of collecting and converting the raw data into useful information is expensive for large tech companies. Therefore, it does not seem reasonable that they would want to pay you for your data or that this process is scalable in the long run.
For weaknesses, we believe that although there is an efficiency increase of 30%, perhaps there is a way to reach the other 70% since the statistics would not be very incentivizing to the public, relating to the fact that the adoption of the measures proposed cannot and should not be left to the government alone, although ministries should also be incentivized. The presentation also explores too briefly how the project will carry out the implementations identified by the AI. For example, if a crop needs more water, how will this be provided? Or if a certain crop is incompatible to that specific soil and the farmer should invest and focus on a different type of crop, how would the team secure variety and biodiversity not only locally but globally? The mention to Microsoft would also cause some concerns since it makes the viewer question where is the innovation part besides the wider and more international implementation, besides causing some suspicion as to why would their project work if Microsoft's didn't, since one would assume that if Microsoft had been successful, they would have expanded the project worldwide, keeping in mind that, as mentioned by the team, nations have very different soil features and handling methods for which that even if successful in the US, there's no guarantee this idea will have the same effect in other countries, for which again, there's probably a reason why Microsoft hasn't extended it. Our team would also like to call upon that not only the solution part matters, but also the prevention. For example, when the video refers to tobacco, why not focus on solving these harming factors to reach the most sustainable environments where the crops already planted could survive, for example, cutting in sustainable practices, rather than simply adapting the soils and crops to a damaged environment. For example, the amounts of water gallons used by the fashion industry to produce a single piece of clothing instead of being used to grow fruit. The team should also develop further on funding for acquiring the drones, but also resources, assuming this will not only come from the government's interest. Finally, the team should consider the case of drone failure where they could fall on top of the crops or even population or explode or could even be hacked and used to spy, for example, in war contexts for which population's privacy is at risk.
Yeah, another weakness is that they could have developed on how they will implement the new technologies in developing countries where farming has still a more traditional approach, because I believe that will be a challenge that they should look deeper at.
Yeah, and to add about that, they do specify about hiring experts to convert data and to hire farmers, but it's really not very clear on how will they make sure that these are implemented.
The only real critique we have is that there's no way for investors to really earn a profit themselves. And because drone technology for surveying and data collecting already does exist, the investors may not feel very inclined to actually pursue the idea itself.
The group doesn't specify how they plan to convince farmers to listen to data and analysis done by the drones. In addition, the idea isn't exactly original, because Microsoft and other large companies have done this too. The proposal doesn't highlight any plan of what to do once the data is collected and fully analyzed for use.
The proposal also shies away from the likely scenario of there being conflicting data that encourages the use of pesticides and non-sustainable methods against environmentally friendly methods. What would the group do in this scenario? We were also not able to discern what the funding plan was for this project. Furthermore, it is unclear how they can establish relationships and connections needed for the successful implementation of this project. This includes governments, farmers, companies, and others. Furthermore, it would be better to expand on the problem of soil degradation. Also, what if there is no hope for the farmers to be productive in that area? Would they have to move their farms to a different area? Finally, is there a quota that every farmer needs to achieve in order to be considered productive?
Overall, the lack of clarity surrounding your funding makes it difficult to see the plan in action. Without a significant source of funding to pay for these expensive drones and advanced technology, the implementation of this plan seems impractical.
Therefore, one recommendation we have is that you include more specific details about the exact implementation of your plan. For example, numbers such as how many drones will be needed and the total cost of your plan versus how much you expect tech companies to pay you will make your idea much more developed and feasible as a plan that can be truly deployed in the real world.
We also recommend that you spend more time creating a more interesting and creative presentation that is different from a normal slide presentation with a voiceover to add to the appeal of your proposal.
For this project, our team's recommendations would be first, a photo point surveying. This is already being used rather successfully by initiatives such as ReefQuest, which is more focused on ocean action. But what it does is that it allows for common citizens to self-educate by accessing photos to have a visual notion of what a crop damaged by a specific factor looks like, or even taking these photos themselves and ask to those who know. A practical image use that would help people understand what symptoms to pay attention to and learn how to monitor and record their own progress. The other recommendation is an exchange program between farmers, land sites, or even businesses that would create a larger linked supply chain that would provide and afford the resources needed to carry the implementations processed by the AI. Such would reduce individual effort and provide entrepreneurship opportunities that could offer experience and training to the suppliers. Therefore, the workers would be able to closely witness and experience benefits such as higher incomes, profits, product quality, and living standards, and therefore support more the project since they would feel part of it, as many times demanding people to adopt practices can have the opposite effect.
Yeah, so the training will incentivize motivation overall, and this would also reflect on the lands because they could be used in an even more efficient way.
Exactly, and it's also keeping in mind that innovation can be more than technology. It can be transformation of mindsets, a humanitarian advancement so large that could encourage and inspire, making everyone part of it, which is something even stronger since innovation comes in any form.
And our main suggestion for AI for agriculture is to possibly include ways that this data could be used to specifically tailor solutions to the area studied rather than just show where the problem lies.
A better idea would be to empower farmers and give them the opportunity to make their own decisions, or you could map out an internal model of how the proposal will be achieved with like SMART goals and to develop a funding plan.